Well, Spencer, thank you so much for joining the Consistency Project.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be here. Long time listener, first time guest.
Yeah, I'm glad we could get you on and talk about behavior change, which turns out I talk about that a lot. So to get your expertise is going to be great here. One of the things I would love to know about first, though, is you've been around performance and fitness for some time. And as far as I understand, how you've kind of thought about coaching and helping your athletes and clients has shifted over the years. And now, especially with BPR, a little bit more behavior first, if I could say. Could you kind of
Yeah,
describe why that came to be or how that came to be?
absolutely. One, I wish there was a much easier answer. I think for a lot of us in health and fitness, we ourselves had a very transformative experience through fitness. It was this entry, it was this portal into a lot of good, positive changes throughout our lives. And so we become coaches and we think, well, man, if I can just learn as much as possible about fitness, then I'm going to be able to create that same change in others. And I found the hard way that you can have wonderful skills as far as coaching fitness. You can know all about strength conditioning, but it doesn't necessarily demand that someone will change. And just like you said, there are some prerequisites that really should be in place. There is a way to talk to clients that I was never taught from a fitness standpoint. And if you can do those things, and it's not incredibly complicated. I think it's actually really simple. But if you have that adjacent skill set, then fitness could almost be like a celebration versus the keystone habit that, gosh, if you just do this, everything else will like fall in line. And so over a long period of time, and I think with a lot of resistance, wishing that I could just have like a great hour of training and that would solve everyone's problems. We've arrived at this point where we think, man, we have to be really intentional to have very specific conversations with people around these other, we call them territories of health that are right next to fitness. And, you know, in a big system, they do all work interdependently. But you can't just talk about one and then hope that something else will work. You actually have to be brave enough to introduce the topic. And then I'll stop my monologue right there.
Yes, and I think we're going to get into some of that discussion. For example, motivational interviewing, correct? It's pretty a
Yeah.
key aspect in driving behavior change. Can you, I know we've got definitely some coaches in our audience, but help people understand what motivational interviewing is and perhaps how that might difficult from some of the more classic dialogue you would have had before you kind of more of, again, behavior first type of philosophy. Behavior change first, yeah.
Yeah. I believe, and I followed this track for a long time, once upon a time, that to be a coach was to be an expert.
Mm.
And just like I said a second ago, if I can have the utmost confidence in what I know, these people will come to me and I can truly, you can picture this, like lead them down the path of transformation.
Hmm.
And I think if we zoom way out and you use a term like motivational interviewing, it is changing places with the client. Now, make no mistake, there are things that if such as yourself, you're truly an expert in nutrition, oh, it would be so silly at times to not offer some of the expert knowledge that you have paid money for, studied, poured over, so that you might make it a more efficient process for people.
Hmm.
But the way that lasting change works is not by this hierarchy of, hey, look how smart I am and you're an idiot, so come to me and I'll like tell you these really basic things that clearly you're not intelligent enough to grasp. But it's talking to someone in a way where you're really, really clear about what it is that they want. Now,
Mm.
there's a lot of different acronyms for motivational interviewing, and there was a time where I would get really bogged down on like this checklist, like, oh man, am I okay? Open-ended questions. Okay, oh, okay, I got an affirmation now. Oh, was that enough for reflection? If we make it really simple An interview is getting a glimpse of some part of this person as deeply as you can. And the word motivational is to elicit an emotion from that person. So if you strip away all the frameworks and all of the textbook understandings of this, it's a type of conversation where you put the client front and center, and you more or less put them in the hot seat, but you do it in a way that feels like there's unconditional love there. And that's a weird combination. But you have no vested interest in what they want. I don't care.
Right.
When I sit down with somebody, I don't care what their goals are. I just care that we really get to the bottom of what it is that they want. And so this concept of motivational interviewing does have a few tools and tricks that you don't need to have like a, it written on your arm or like a QB sleeve to go about it. But asking an open-ended question can do wonders.
Yeah.
To say, hey, you told me you want to lose some weight. Tell me all about that. Start from the beginning. Don't leave a single detail out. And I'm going to keep asking you these questions until we arrive at something that seems very unique for you versus a generic response that you think I'm wanting to hear. And I'll say stuff like that. And then they have permission just to go off. And I'm listening and I'm paying attention. And then the second tool is just to repeat back what you heard them say. Hey, you said that this is all about looking good for your 20-year high school reunion. Is that really the truth? Is that really what this is all about? And that concept in psychology is called reflection, and there's lots of ways to do that. But the simple aspect of it is you're just clarifying that what they said is true, and that then gives them permission to say, yeah, dude, that's absolutely what I think. But a lot of times they'll be like, well, no, that's not it at all. And then you just keep going until you arrive at this point where they feel like they led the conversation. And then two, they're at a place where there's a palpable emotion present, because not often does somebody have an active listener that really wants to know why you care about something. And so it's a process that takes time. It's not quite as fun as, playing 90s hip hop and doing row repeats. But if you can spend 30 minutes doing that, it completely changes the relationship that you'll have with the client, and it will completely change the trajectory of their tenure with you as a client, I think.
Yeah, I think those are really good tools. The open-ended questions, the reflection. I feel like I've heard myself say that a little bit all the time. Like, I care about you, but I don't care what your goal is. It's like, tell me what it is and I'll help you get there type of thing. Now, this idea of eliciting emotion is interesting. Is there a certain type of emotion that you're looking for? Is it more of a frustration? Or when they get clearly happy? Like, how do you know that you kind of hit that? I mean, I know you said not sort of a generic, but it's interesting that you have this emotion there with it. So there's a common emotion that you're sort of looking for?
Yeah, I think there's parts of this process in dealing with behavior that really are cold-blooded. When we talk about creating a system, that can be so riddled with shame. It can be so intimately tied for people with self-worth. But when we get to that point in this process, we make a really clear distinction. It's like, hey, you failing or being successful has nothing to do with how good of a person you are. It's just that this wasn't an effective way to go about it. And part of design is to iterate and prototype and make that better. So I want to have parts of this journey, so to speak, that are really logical, and they're really, frontal cortex, just give me the blueprint and let's go for it. But I've found that if we can spend some time on the human element to start, it almost gives us permission to shift gears like that. And so to answer your question, I'm not necessarily looking for anything, because I found that there are some people that are really motivated to avoid a hell that they have experienced in the past. But I found that people are just as motivated to catch a glimpse of what they think would be heaven if they could accomplish something. So I'm looking for fear. I'm looking for excitement. I'm looking for hesitation. I'm looking for anger. Don't care what it is, but would love for something to come up, and then just call a spade. Be like, hey, is this? It looks like. I mean, you got to be careful not to be like a complete. You have to watch your sarcasm very closely, and I've found that I can sound sarcastic. So you wouldn't say, "Hey, it looks like you're crying," when they're obviously crying.
Right.
But at the appropriate moment, just to highlight, like, hey, it seems like this is something that is really important to you, and I can tell by what you're saying and then what you're not saying. Is that true? And that right there, that little recognition, you got a dad who's 43 that for the last 20 years has been taking care of his family. And for the first time ever, he decides that as an adult, he's going to take care of himself. And I say, hey, it looks like this is really important to you to show your kids that you want to be healthy. I can get that guy to do some incredible things once he allows himself to feel how true that is. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think hitting on somebody's emotion is a clear indication that they're no longer saying those general platitudes, right? So yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a specific emotion. Okay. So I think one of the things, and that some of this is just what I know about you and BPR, so you're going to correct me where I'm wrong, but I think some of the other strategies that you like to employ are really identifying kind of a minimum effective dose for the person to create behavior change. And hopefully my audience resonates with that as well. And so can you kind of explain how you think about that in terms of behavior change and helping a client to identify what that is? I know that's a huge question, but what's the difference between just a change in the direction of good or something that's actually going to produce an outcome?
Yeah, great question. Not too big of a question. I think our job in this, ideal of how we're trying to understand the role of coaching, maybe 20% of it is education. There is a time and a place, like we say, where, man, if I was able to share this information, let me take my partner hat off and put like my expert hat on, and man, I'm going to say some stuff and I hope that this really lands for you. And information around systems theory typically is some of that information that is really helpful, because when you look at what is typically the journey for most people is, I have found, not a lack of enthusiasm or excitement. Usually it's been bottled up for so long that when they finally are in this stage where they're ready to take action, man, it's very easy to go overboard. And some of that is because we often don't appreciate how interconnected these different parts of a system of health are. When you recognize that in a complex system, there's causal loops, which is just a simple term to say that things are connected, and because they're connected, there's delays in effect, then it makes a lot of sense that we would start with the minimum dose that would produce change. Now, every word in that sentence is important, because if it's minimal and it doesn't do anything, well, it's not actually enough. But here's a great example from a fitness standpoint. There's great research to support that we don't actually have to go to failure to produce changes in strength and hypertrophy and muscular endurance. We could have a rep in reserve of 2 to 3 the entire time that we progressively overload, and we can still reap benefits. And so when you realize, like, okay, there's some latitude there. You could go to failure every single time and you could get results, but you could also do the minimum and get results. And so you would ask yourself, well, why would we want to do the minimum when the world that we're surrounded in is all about maximizing? And it's because it's not the only thing that we care about. If all we cared about was pure unadulterated performance, we would. But if we say, hey, at the end of the day, I want to keep exercising long term, and hey, at the end of the day, I want to sleep enough. I want my joints to feel good for a long, long time. I want to have a manageable amount of stress. That's a huge one. Then we actually look to get by with what checks the box, but nothing in excess. And that's a really different paradigm for most people, and myself included. I'm a reformed
Firm excess chaser.
maximal lethal dose, practitioner. So it's something that I still struggle with. Like, hey, is this enough? Is it not enough? And it's not, because it's a wicked problem, right? Which means like the thing that we're solving for can constantly be changing, and the system itself is constantly changing. It's not as easy to do, but I think it's in the context that we're talking about, it's a philosophical stance that is exactly in line with the Hippocratic Oath, which is to do no harm. And if we can err on the side of that, man, we're off to a really strong start of being able to sustain it.
You mentioned you have a lot of clients, especially when they get maybe, in the right program and they know that they're with you and they've got all these great things they can now chase, that it's almost like they have all this energy that's bottled up and they're just so ready for so much action. So do you find that in many cases you're almost pumping the brakes on what they want to do versus your plan for them?
That's a really good question. I mean, my knee jerk is to say yes. And what a, stupid lame answer to say, well, it depends.
But it does.
But I think it could be contextual. So some of that is, look, if somebody comes in and they say, I'm willing for the time being to make a compromise. I want to train for this thing that's a defined end date, and I really want to see how far I can push this, and I understand the repercussions, and when this is over, we'll have to cycle back to these other areas that are important, and I want you to go deep down into that rabbit hole with me. I'll say okay. And I think you and I both know there's times, I heard Kelly Starrett say, there's times in life where you do want to touch the electrical fence.
Yeah.
And I think that if we know the repercussions of that, yeah, for the most part, yes. What I have found, though, is people don't actually often recognize the repercussions. And so they're enthusiastically going in the wrong direction. And it's at that point that I do think back to motivational interviewing, and then even there's a small faction of coaches that say you should never give your opinion, right? It's so slanted towards self-efficacy and autonomy that's like, hey, don't ever share your opinion. I don't actually agree with that. I think there is a time where you can say, hey, my concern is that we're doing something that's going to have consequences that you don't want to experience. So there are times where I think in the right spirit, you can say those kind of things. And I think it's the role of a coach to have the courage to say that when they see the client doing something that they don't really know what's going to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm defending my own coaching style a little bit, but I like the idea of giving the client the options of saying, like, this is where I see that path A going and this is where I see path B going. You decide, because I don't want to be the voice for them. I want them to go under their own volition. But at the same sense, I would get really frustrated if I was going to a coach and that was just like, do whatever. At every turn.
What do you want to do? It's like, you know what? That's not actually
right.
efficient.
Right, exactly. Okay, so you've mentioned a few times that, put this plan into place. Maybe we've identified a minimum effective dose. We got to put a plan into place, try it out, iterate on it. Can you give me some sense, and I know it depends, but some sense of timeline, a realistic timeline for something in the fitness or lifestyle realm that you're willing to test out this plan to say, okay, we are getting a minimum effective dose here. And just to give an example, I often have clients who want to lose weight or tone up, improve their body composition, and I have something that I call a 2-week delay, that we have to wait for at least 2 weeks of consistency before we look at that scale to make a decision about what's happening. And that 2 weeks can feel very long to people, but it's like, hey, we got to give this a chance a little bit. We can't just decide after day 3. Do you have some sort of framework for people? They're trying to get after this change. They want to know if it's working. Of course, we're in the days of Amazon Prime with notifications and delivery immediately. What kind of time frame are you looking for some diet and lifestyle changes, fitness changes, behavior changes?
As a nice heuristic, I say at a minimum 12 weeks.
Holy cats.
And then it's been my experience that, and there's a lot of times where it looks like for 5 months, nothing's happening. And then right when you feel like you've lost the plot, this person has had enough interaction. We've had enough conversation where something truly miraculous happens. And so, is that aggressive to say 12 weeks? Yes. But psychologically, I want to temper their expectations, just like you said, to appreciate lag, delay, feedback loops, and all that stuff. And, a lot of times I'll follow that with saying, like, hey, if you're looking for the fastest process possible, this is not it. But when we're done with this, you won't need me anymore, and you'll be able to keep this up for a really long time. And so I think that is part of this. It's not, you and I both know the absolute fastest way to do things, but we've just arrived at a place where we realize, like, I'm just not willing to do that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like, and again, you're going to correct me if I'm wrong, but some of this delay is ultimately what helps them become in control of this, right? And gives them the power to do this without you. And I love that you said that. I mean, there's a lot of parallels here, but I actually tell my clients I don't want long-term clients as much as I like them. So I guess my one question or pushback would be, because I hear this from my clients, so maybe I'll get the answer from you. How do you keep that engagement throughout? And is it kind of just reminding them of what the point really is, as we just sort of said? Or there's got to be times when they are frustrated maybe with the lack of progress. How do you kind of redirect them to stay on course when you know it's working and maybe they're not so bought in? Week 6, let's
Mm-hmm.
say.
Well, so I have the great luxury of almost having created more problems by introducing more areas that we could focus on. So that's one. If I say, hey, to be healthy, it's really this constant vigilance around 6 territories of health. Something is always going to be in limited supply. So even if we do have great success, and it happens a lot faster than 12 weeks, we're constantly reevaluating, okay, well now that that's improved, what now has slipped? What now could we redirect our focus to?
And
And
could
so
you,
I
I'm
think
sorry
long
to jump in,
term,
but could you just name those 6 territories? Because I don't think we've identified that for the audience.
yeah, so performance is key. We also talk about sleep, sustenance or nutrition, social relationships, stress management, and then last but not least is psychology. And we break that down into, a framework where it's like, okay, psychology can seem nebulous. So if we were to use tools, what areas would we want to improve and so on and so forth. So across that, I mean, there's a lot of meat on the bone. But some of some of what I found to be helpful is to figure out how to objectify some of these things through action versus outcome. I was just reading recently interview with David Mamet. This is a small tangent, but he's Pulitzer Prize winning playwright, wrote Glenn Ross. So very famous screenwriter, and he said that he doesn't care for narration at all. All of his plays are about action. And he goes on to say that if you want to know what somebody values, you just look at what they're doing. It doesn't matter much like what they talk about. It's just action. And so I think that's something for us as coaches you can really hang your hat on, that, yeah, the results may not be there as quickly as possible, but if you say that you care about this and now you are somebody who is doing this thing, you are that guy. And so to come back to the well of that, I found to be incredibly encouraging. And then even how we structure our coaching calls, there's a way that we can highlight what's working, celebrate that, ask the question, hey, is this still the area that we want to keep focusing on? Yes. Okay, what do you think is the next step? No. Why do you think that? Where do you want to go now? And so, yeah, there's a point, like you said, where I become an ugly Mary Poppins, and you just kind of, wave to him, be like,
Mm-hmm.
"You did a great job. We're done." And we front load that, like, "Hey, we're really expecting there to be a graduation here. I don't want to do this for 4 years for you." But that has seemed to pretty organically develop when like you said, we get to a point where we say, "Hey, we've really arrived at a great place, and we don't need to work together anymore." Or, and this happens every once in a while, you know what? I wasn't actually ready to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
And that one's not quite as fun,
Mm-hmm.
but it does happen sometimes.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna actually go to next. I mean, it's almost like
Hmm.
you're planting your own questions.
Awesome. I really
But
like to do that. Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, sometimes I think it's. I mean, we can go into you can go into the technical terms of it all, but the different stages of being ready, thinking about change, and ready to change, and actually changing. And I think there are going to be these cases with clients or even ourselves when we recognize that we want to make a change, but we're not really ready to change. And certainly you've come across that from a coaching perspective of like, they know they want it, but they're kind of reluctant to start the action. What is really the coach's role there? Is it more to point out the dichotomy and try for them to uncover maybe a greater emotion or why that they would want action? Or is it more just helping them identify they're not actually ready? Or is it nudging them towards action by suggesting a small action?
It's a great question. And I think everything up to this point is, I mean, it's really just about like systems and influence and persuasion. But this thing that you're talking about, I think it is the trench work of being a coach.
Mm,
It's recognizing, oh, I'm dealing with a human
mm-hmm,
here. And I talk to coaches a lot about this, that if we have a background that's exclusively dealt with fitness, we have a skewed perception somewhat of this concept,
mm,
because fitness is everything to us. And so if we say, "Oh man, I'm going to train for this," most of us go through this little sequence of readiness very quickly.
mm,
And so when we're working with someone, that for fitness, it's the same for us as it is for finance
mm-hmm,
or social relationships, or something that traditionally wouldn't be seen in the gym. You realize, oh, they're no different than us.
mm-hmm,
Like, all human beings feel reluctance.
mm-hmm,
All human beings go through these stages. And so I think, one, just recognizing that this thing is not weird
mm-hmm,
for us, it's very normal. Secondly, and we can go through some of these stages, being in pre contemplation, if we said that with different language, it would say that your client disagrees with you.
mm.
And that's really hard to stomach too. It's like, well, am I not a good coach? I'm like, no, dude, you're a fine coach. But they literally cannot see this thing that is so high resolution for you.
Mm. Can you give an example of pre-contemplation, please?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you're working with a client, and let's say that you guys have done lots of motivational interviewing. They've been at the gym for some time now. And when you initially talked, they were like, "Hey, I'm so bought in here. Like, recovery workouts, Roger that." And we're 2 months in, and they're not doing it.
Mm,
And furthermore, you catch wind that they're doing exercise outside of the gym. This is your
mm,
avatar that's
mm,
doing a two a day,
mm-hmm,
and they are saying all the things that they think that you want to hear, but you can tell that they believe something drastically different. And so if you were to bring this up, "Hey, I noticed that you're getting a lot of volume in, even a lot of intensity, but we're not doing any workouts that would help you recover." Their response that would let you know that they're in this stage, they would be like, "Well, I don't see a problem with that."
mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
they might say, well, what's wrong with high intensity?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the response you get, oh, it's so valuable. It's so helpful because you know that they're not ready
Mm-hmm.
to actually do that thing.
Yeah.
And it would be a waste of both of your time to say, well, why don't we really get you into a recovery workout?
Mm-hmm.
You realize that if we were to not even talk about fitness and you were to talk about anything else, it would be a fool's errand to jump 12 spaces to action.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that context, if we were to, keep teasing that example out, you would just want to plant the seed. And how do you plant the seed? Like, what is inception? Well, it's just seeing if they could catch on to this very contrarian idea that they currently ascribe to. And so you might say something like, yeah, got it. Would you be open to just tracking your HRV
Mm-hmm.
through all these sessions? What I hear you saying is that you feel like you can handle it. It's not that you think recovery workouts are a bad idea. You just don't really think they're necessary. So what do you say we just keep an eye on how you're recovering?
Mm-hmm.
That could be just enough of an inception that 2 months, I mean, what's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so some of this is a little, it's a little game. It's an art, right? Instead of saying like, hey, that's a dumb idea and you shouldn't be doing that, and do what I say because I've done this for 20 years and you're just starting to exercise. Back to what we were saying before, it doesn't go to the place that ultimately you're trying to get them to, which
Mm-hmm.
is to do it on their own and to have an appreciation and a testimony for really healthy behaviors.
Yeah.
So in that stage, it does help to realize that it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about your acumen as a coach, but it's just what this person needs at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, pre-contemplation is the first stage. And I always think that the sentences they'll say are not metaphors. They'll be like, I don't even know what you're talking about. They really don't. Or
Mm.
I can't even see myself doing that. Not a metaphor. They
Mm.
literally cannot visualize doing this behavior that you
Right.
said would be so good for them.
Right.
And as you get closer to, somebody actually doing something, which is what we call action, there's some ambivalence that's usually there.
Mm.
And this is something that we're super familiar with. Somebody starts really hot at the beginning of the week, but then by Thursday they've ghosted on you.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens week after week, and you bring this up and you say, hey, my concern is that we start the week really hot and by the end we're nowhere to be found. And they say, yeah, I mean, part of me really wants to see it through, but then and there's another part that's just so tired. Like they just told you
Mm-hmm.
that they're really conflicted.
Mm-hmm.
Another sentence, man, I know that would be so good if I could make it in 3 days a week, but man, work is just crazy.
Mm.
And so the coach's response could very simply just be parroting that. So you're really conflicted by what would be good for your health, but you got other responsibilities here as well. Is that right? And when you say something like that, it's like you just told somebody you understand everything about their childhood. They feel very, very validated. So back to your original question, and then I'll end it right here. I think the why is interesting. And as a lover of psychology, I think it's very easy to go down that road. It's like, what, why do you think that you're doing this? Do you feel like it's a latent immunity to change? But a lot of those things are great conversations to have. But once again, it doesn't do much to move them towards change. It's illuminating. It can be cathartic. It can be very healing. But I think our job is constantly going back to like, well, what will work? What can we do? And even if they're not ready for change, there's lots of things that you can still do. And so it's just figuring out like, what are the right tools? What's a great tool, but like not yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I really liked your point about especially from a coaching perspective, not sort of taking offense to you as your skills, but just recognizing people are along a different gradation of readiness for change. And maybe you can help in different ways with that. But I do think it's really helpful to understand that you kind of want to wait till the clients are ready for you and for them. And it's okay if they're in a
Hmm.
different kind of part of their evolution. Okay, I do have one more question for you, but before I get to that question, I guess I had two more questions then. Obviously, you dive way more into this stuff with your coach's course. So, can you give us a little insight of who really would be a great fit for that and a little bit about the format?
Yeah, the person that would be a great candidate for it is somebody, just like I said in the beginning of our conversation, that looks up and they say, "Man, I've got some skills. I really want to help, but I'm looking to make potentially a bigger impact in this person's life, and I'm willing to go down this journey of an intimate relationship with that person." And I think that's a part of it. You know, a lot of times we like the idea of wanting to help people transform, but you realize like this is a very time consuming, and it's a very intimate process with someone that I personally feel really honored to be able to do. But if you're not willing to go there, it's not for you.
Mm.
But this thing that we're doing, it's 8 weeks. It's live. We have some pre-recorded content, which is a lot of what we're talking about, just in greater detail. But the live sessions are actually doing all these things that we're just kind of giving tongue-in-cheek examples to, because we found that if coaches can practice it and they have just enough reps to understand, oh, there's that thing that we did. Okay, now it's in this context. This imposter syndrome that we all feel, we can, instead of let that envelop us completely, we can put it just as like a little, just a little parrot on our shoulders, and listen to it, be like, yeah, of course I'm not an expert at everything, but I have just enough skill here, just enough practice that I can partner with my clients in this way that I desperately want to, and I can make a bigger impact. And anecdotally, it's like the most fun thing I've ever done, because I myself have felt like a weird kid in the world of fitness. It's like,
Mm.
guys, there I go again, talking about this thing. It's like, dude, can't we just like work out and play good music? And I found that it's like a island of misfit toys, and I'm just surrounded by a bunch of people, from across the country and elsewhere. They're like, hey, dude, I get it.
Mm.
And so it feels partly like a community group, like a support group. But obviously we have an agenda, and our goal is to really help people change.
Awesome.
So
We'll put links for the BPR Institute, of course, in the show notes. The last question I have for you, I think you know the book Man's Search for Meaning.
I do.
What would be a takeaway there from the perspective of behavior change?
Hmm. Frankel said, "He who has a why can endure any how." And I think when you talk about just the whole world of logotherapy and what he brought to the world of psychology, that deep meaning is this secret superpower for our clients and then for us as well. So I found that all of this really started because I wanted to tell a better story for myself. I mean, you and I have known each other for a long, long time, but I got at a point where I thought, is this what my life's going to be about? Just, coaching ring muscle ups and thrusters? Like, is this the thing? And I think selfishly, I wanted to tell a story that felt like I had a different relationship with people, a different impact, and all of that, to be honest, spawned from that book.
Mm.
Probably read it 10 times. And I'm always moved by that concept, that if we can find something that we feel deeply is important to us, man, it can get us to do some pretty incredible things that without it would be hard for anyone to convince us is worth it. And so I think that we need that as coaches. We need to reestablish a better relationship with what we do and realize that, man, we can do things that have a pretty lasting impact. And then I think for the client, there's a way, just like we said at the beginning, where, hey, we're going to sit here until we come up with something that just feels so juicy. It feels so epic, so monumental, that much like any story that's ever been told, it has such a narrative traction here that the both of us are really excited to move forward. And if we can do that, it's not a perfect process, but it becomes something like deeply symbolic. And yeah, just to circle back to what he talks about, like deeply meaningful to both the coach and the client.
I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up. Thank you, Spencer.
Oh, thank you. What a pleasure. And yeah, thank you for those questions too.